Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on what part of the world you're calling in from. My name is Marty Bent. I'm a managing partner at 1031. We are a Bitcoin-focused investment platform, not a real estate fund, as we were just joking. Behind stage, beyond that, I am also the founder of TFTC, a media company focused on Bitcoin, truth, and freedom in the digital age. Today, we're here to talk about the philanthropic consideration at the frontier. We are joined by Phoenix Hafen of University Impact, Alex Gladstein of the Human Rights Foundation, and Jason Keil, donor and CEO and founder of Polaris Payments. And we're going to talk about sort of philanthropic considerations as it pertains to Bitcoin. And before we jump into the meat of the conversation, I'm just going to throw it to you three. We'll go in order: Phoenix, Alex, Jason. Introduce yourselves, what your organization does, and a broad overview of how you're integrating Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Phoenix Hafen. I'm the partnerships manager at Charitable. And we are a philanthropic back office. And so we work with a lot of financial advisors, wealth managers, and high net worth individuals to help them accomplish their philanthropic goals. And what that means, usually, our most common product offering is donor advised funds. And a donor advised fund is essentially a charitable account. So you put assets into the donor advised fund, take an immediate tax deduction, and then those assets can stay in the donor advised fund, invested. They can grow over time. And when you're ready to make gifts out to charities or nonprofits, you can distribute grants out to those charities or nonprofits. And so a donor advised fund is essentially a way to separate the tax consequences of your giving from when that giving is actually accomplished.
And Alex, we can throw it to you. What are you guys up to at the Human Rights Foundation?
Yeah, so we're celebrating our 20th birthday this year at HRF, promoting civil liberties worldwide for people who live under authoritarian regimes. It's kind of a sad state of affairs that only about 25 to 30% of the world lives under some kind of society where there's things like free speech and property rights that are guaranteed in a strong way. More than 5.7 billion people live under an authoritarian government, and there's very little support for them when it comes to their work to try and bring more freedom to their country. So that's what we do. So we work in adversarial environments, and we do a lot of work with Bitcoin and other open source freedom tech, because that's oftentimes one of the only tools people there can use. Other stuff is just not available to them, and traditional ways to criticize or push back on the government are just not options. And in that work, we've been fortunate to receive, philanthropy and donations from generous individuals and families and companies. And over the last 6-7 years, that's become increasingly Bitcoin native. So a lot of our donations now come in as Bitcoin gifts. And, DAFs are, these donor advised funds are, I think in America, at least, kind of a lifeblood of a lot of charities. It allows people to make gifts in a way that's obviously very tax preferred. And it's cool to see the Bitcoinization of this, and we've benefited from that in a big way. So people have chosen HRF as the recipient of some of those gifts, which is awesome. So really exciting to see the world of philanthropy catch up to Bitcoin in this area, and I think it's the start of something huge.
Awesome. Jason.
Yeah, hi, I am Jason. I'm an entrepreneur, founded a credit card processing company about 15 years ago called Polaris Payments that I still run today. Recently been focused on helping merchants accept Bitcoin, have a new company called the Bitcoin Payments Advisor, but I'm also a donor, and I'm really excited about the donor advised fund product from Unchained. In my case, I have rental properties, and I sort of discovered Bitcoin and realized I wanted to move asset classes. And you can't really 1031, we were talking about that earlier, from real estate into Bitcoin. But you kind of can if your final destination is, philanthropy. And so I'm excited to talk about that today.
Awesome. And let's throw it back to Phoenix just to give a ground level sort of first principles explanation of these donor advised funds. When did they come to market? How have people utilized them in the past? And what advantages does it provide those who are looking to donate, and then the organizations that ultimately are receiving those donations?
Yeah, sure. So donor advised funds have been around for a while. They've gained popularity over the past decade or so as an alternative to a private foundation. It's really, a private foundation and a donor advised fund. They're both charitable vehicles. A donor advised fund's just easier to spin up, no required annual distribution, lower ongoing costs. So just kind of a more flexible vehicle all around. But yeah, as I mentioned, so it's essentially a charitable account, right? So you set it up, you're able to put assets into it, take an immediate tax deduction, and then recommend grants to charities over time. And so there are a few cases where it makes a lot of sense. So one of those is if you have a charitable intent and you're getting near the end of the year. So, right now we're in mid-October, people are, starting to understand what their income is for the year. Maybe they know they want to give some amount to charity, and they know it's, they want to reduce their taxable income, but they're not sure quite what they want to do with it yet. That's where a donor advised fund, one case where a donor advised fund is a great fit. So you can put, Bitcoin into your donor advised fund at the end of the year, take the charitable tax deduction for the 2025 tax year, and then that Bitcoin can grow over time. And as you find organizations that are worthy and that you'd like to support, you can support them over the coming years.
Yeah, and Jason, you described that you're very excited about Unchained's donor advised fund specifically. What about their product, or the fact that Bitcoiners now have the ability to put their Bitcoin up in these funds, really excites you?
Yeah, so like I said, I had acquired appreciating assets, mostly real estate, and I wanted to give away a house. It was going to save $70,000 in capital gains taxes by giving it away. So I asked my CPA about this. He was not a Bitcoiner. He was not a generosity inclined individual. He basically told me not to. So we listed the house for sale. We went under contract. And then I ended up talking to Unchained. They connected me to UI Charitable. And then I found out I could have donated the house, but we were already on a contract. And so I ended up finding, so we had to sell the house, but ended up finding some ETH and put that, was able to convert that to Bitcoin. And this is from that I bought years ago, and it's a taxable event to, you start pricing everything in Bitcoin and you realize like everything is losing value. My home, one of my houses has lost 99.99% of its value when denominated Bitcoin. And ETH, same thing, it's losing value. And so I start putting more and more things into Bitcoin, but then you realize it's not a very tax optimized way to just start selling assets. And so I really appreciate the aspect that not only is it a donor advised fund that you can hold Bitcoin in, but you can hodl your Bitcoin without having to decide up front where you're going to give it away, but you also retain a key. So I get to, keep my cold card and make sure that it's going to go to the final destination, helping the poor, helping the vulnerable, helping HRF, whatever it is, open SATs, whatever it is. and SBF or whoever, they're not going to rug pull me, and a thief is not going to get my Bitcoin. I can hold it in collaboration with Unchained and UI Charitable. And I can make donations along the way every year. If I want to make some donations, I can, but it's basically the start of a family foundation that I can have self-custody Bitcoin with.
Yeah, as you're describing that, maybe this is a good question for Alex, but soup to nuts, getting off zero to actually deciding who to give Bitcoin to. Like, does this work end to end Bitcoin native? Like, can people send sats directly from the donor advised fund on Unchained to an organization like HRF?
Yeah.
Is this
Yeah.
a part of the
When
circular economy?
Yeah, we'll get a notification from Unchained that one of the donors wants to make the gift, and then gift comes in Bitcoin. We put it directly into our treasury, and we've been trying to encourage since around 2018 other charities to think this way. But basically, usually when someone donates Bitcoin to you, there's a lot of intentionality in that, right? It's not like they're just getting rid of some shitcoin or making a fiat donation or whatever. There's some intentionality that they want you to use that in a particular way, and sometimes they'll even put this in writing, which is helpful. But basically, like, don't sell the Bitcoin unless you absolutely have to, and instead spend it or just hold it, right? So it's not like usually a charity will have basically a checking account where they have enough cash on hand for the next couple payrolls or whatever it is, right? And then they'll have then if they're lucky or fortunate, they'll have investments, which is usually some Wall Street bank or whatever. Some charities will have real estate or other kinds of property. We want to introduce Bitcoin to that mix as like a treasury, essentially, for charities, nonprofits, universities to think about, where essentially, like, you can think of the two different income streams in terms of Bitcoin versus fiat. Like we don't buy Bitcoin, and I'm not sure I'd necessarily recommend that charities do that. I mean, I think it could be great, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think right now in this day and age, it's okay if you get a fiat donation, you keep it in fiat. Okay, it's okay. It can either be in your cash on hand, or you can invest it however you want. I think that's fine. But when you bring in Bitcoin, I mean, you should stay in Bitcoin for the most part, unless you really have to sell it. And if you've got to sell it, you should have a partner who can sell it for you. Essentially, if you're a charity, you should look to work with someone who's willing to do that at a huge discount or free. And there's some groups out there willing to do that. But yeah, I mean, we think the whole process, should just be Bitcoin native. So donations coming in Bitcoin, you hold the Bitcoin yourself as a charity using a product like Unchained, actually, or Casa. I think really makes sense for nonprofits. It's really nice to have geographic, jurisdictional risk spread around, and to have it so that there's a bunch of different key holders, and it's worked extremely well for us for many years. And I think that as many charities as possible should be custodying their own Bitcoin. They can sleep much safer at night, more securely, more sound, and they don't have to worry about their treasury being frozen or whatever, or going down, or not being able to reach it. That's the superpower Bitcoin gives us. So I think the whole stack is getting to the point where, yeah, I mean, you have the donor, you have the donation, you can have a DAF. There's certainly the tax apparatus to work around, which makes the DAF really great. But yeah, donations come right to us in Bitcoin, which is awesome.
Well, I'm going to stay with you for a minute, Alex, because I think it's important for everybody here. What has keeping your Bitcoin donations in Bitcoin done for the HRF since you started?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to go
do?
into numbers, but like, let's just put it this way: we have many gifts that have been made where it's like if we had sold the gift into dollars to use the dollars for human rights work, instead of just keeping it in Bitcoin and using the Bitcoin for human rights work, we wouldn't have any of the gift left. And there's some cases where it's like, we've been doing this for a while. In some cases, we had a gift come in and it's like, we've used 3 to 4 times the initial dollar amount of that gift, meaning we've already used it 3 to 4 times what came in. And we still have 3 to 4 times or 5 times the initial dollar amount left over. That's the magic of Bitcoin over time, if you're willing to be patient with it. Now, this, of course, requires, a strategy where you have different kinds of donations coming in and where you can sustain yourself. But my general, the dream is basically to have, as a fundraiser, you got to bring in a certain amount each year to keep to essentially keep the lights on, right, at a nonprofit. And that's right now that's going to be a fiat denominated amount. Let's just call it, I'll just make up a number. We'll just say you need $1 million a year as your nonprofit. You're doing educational work in New Jersey. Okay, you need $1 million a year to pay everybody, get everything done. Okay, well, if half of that can be in Bitcoin, then things start to get interesting over time, right? Because it's not like you're just $1 million in, $1 million out. You start to build a treasury over time. And then all of a sudden, like what happens is, like when you have a donor issue, oh shoot, we only brought in 750K this year. It's okay. You can, if you have to, you can sell off 250K from the treasury. So I think this is just something that takes time for people to do, but building this thing out is a huge superpower for nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that, turn this to Phoenix and Jason, maybe too, can riff on this, but for an individual, a family office, a foundation that wants to begin donating or set up a donor advised fund, like what power does Bitcoin have in the sense that does it enable people who may not have the money they ultimately would like to donate over the course of their lives to be able to start these DAFs earlier because they have the confidence that Bitcoin's going to grow in purchasing power? What
So
I guess a better way to put it is how does this enhance the goals of an individual that wants to donate and be philanthropic?
Yeah, so there's probably a few considerations there. And so one is just in making donations to charity or to a donor advised fund in general, the best assets are the ones that have the best assets to donate are the ones that have a lot of capital gains liability. And that's because, for example, if you have highly appreciated Bitcoin and you want to support a charity with it, but they can only accept cash. If you sell that Bitcoin, pay the capital gains tax on the portion of appreciation, and then support that charity, one, your tax deduction is now less, and that end charity is receiving less money. So what you want to do is you want to take those highly appreciated assets and put them directly into a donor advised fund. And then your tax deduction is the full fair market value of what you donated. And now that charity can either receive that cash, they can either receive it in Bitcoin and receive the full fair market value, or if they can only accept cash, you can liquidate that Bitcoin within the donor advised fund. And there's no capital gains liability because you've already donated it by putting it in the donor advised fund. And so, really whatever your timeline is, if you're looking to optimize how much your tax deduction is and how much you're giving to charity, you're going to want to donate assets in kind that have the most capital gains liability. Does that make sense? Any questions on that?
That makes sense to me. Jason, you have anything to add to this?
Yeah. So, in my case, again, like you start denominating in Bitcoin and everything changes. And so we had this vision, we were going to like give a house to every child, and then give a few houses to charity. And you start denominating Bitcoin, you're like, oh my gosh, real estate is like cratering in price and value. And so um yeah, I mean, Bitcoin unlocks like crazy impact. So we talk about ROI with investing, return on investment, but I think that if you are trying to make the world a better place, uh, you can do that by providing valuable goods and services. If you run a business like me, or you know, whatever it is you're doing in life, do a good job at it. But with your investments, um, to some extent, some of that for me is going to go to my kids, but not all of it. And I, Bitcoin is the hurdle rate with my philanthropy. And so in some cases, I might want to donate today. But a lot of cases, like I just don't have time to really put a lot of energy into like vetting. I have a young family, I have a business, I'm busy. And so my philanthropic decisions, likely many of them will be made later in my life. And so I can hodl today. And it's also kind of a forced hodl. Like I'm forcing myself to be a generous person in the future. A lot of times when the waters rise, like the boats rise with it, like you begin to spend more money. Maybe that's not the case for Bitcoiners, because like we tend to be more frugal, but I like a portion of my assets being forced to not hold on and be stingy, but to be generous. And Bitcoin unlocks tremendous amounts of impact, or it will unlock in the future tremendous amounts of impact.
Mhm. I mean, on this note too, we see it a lot at 1031. A good portion of our LP base are individuals who've been longtime Bitcoiners, and they really want to support the space, and they do that many ways, donating to nonprofits like the Human Rights Foundation, OpenSats, Brink, and many others. But they also see that there's a path to support the industry on the for-profit side via something like 1031. But to that point, like Alex specifically, what do these Bitcoin donations do to push Bitcoin forward, freedom tech forward? Like how impactful are they? What are these donations leading to from a freedom and proliferation of Bitcoin perspective?
I mean, basically, what we're trying to do is take the model of what we've accomplished here in this US regulatory setting, and then help other people achieve it around the world. I mean, in America, doing what we've been discussing here is helpful from a tax perspective, but it's not like a life or death thing. Like worst case, a donor can liquidate, pay taxes, But globally, I mean, Bitcoin is the only way in many countries, right? So you can't just make a bank wire to a a civil society group in a country like Egypt or Hong Kong. It's not going to happen. It'll either result in the arrest of the people that you send the money to, or it just simply won't go through at all. There's also just crazy usurious fees and massive rent seeking when you try to move money abroad from one country to another. So with Bitcoin, you have total power, and as a charity in the U.S., legally speaking, it doesn't matter whether you send Home Depot stock or euros or dollars or Bitcoin to someone. They have to fill out the same paperwork that you and your accountants put together. It's just the huge upside is that the other, the government in the country, the running the country where you're supporting someone doesn't have to know immediately. When you send a bank wire, it says your organization's name on it in huge capital letters. It's massively problematic for funding human rights and freedom work. So with Bitcoin, they have no idea, right? And it's just such a transformative thing globally. So and that's often what's going to happen as a result of this kind of thing that we've been discussing. If you build up enough Bitcoin flow where donors start to give Bitcoin, then organizations can give Bitcoin out, and they can do payroll in Bitcoin, and then you can do other things in Bitcoin, which of course, yes, it definitely has huge benefits from a tax perspective and from a wealth building perspective. That would be good enough, right? But the freedom aspects of it are incalculable.
Well, and to build on this too, like I think a lot of Bitcoiners who are more libertarian leaning really don't want to pay taxes, and they think they can allocate money better than the
Yeah.
government can, which I wholeheartedly agree with. But like to that
Mhm.
point, not only is the HRF sort of connecting with other human rights freedom fighters around the world, but you're also supporting people working on software that enables Bitcoin to basically get around the world,
Yes.
people to use Bitcoin more privately. So can you speak to the
Sure.
projects you've been able to fund that enable this, and what
Well,
that's
I mean, it
done
could be
for
as
the
simple as something
usability?
like a BTCPay server. Maybe not as simple, but as fundamental as BTCPay server, which was really the first software setup that helped NGOs and small businesses globally understand how they could, you know, accept Bitcoin and remain uh, with a super high degree of customer service and simplicity for the payer or the donor. And now we just have so many different ways to do it. It's very exciting. I mean, there's so many wallets out there. A lot of them we've supported. We've been very aggressive about supporting ecash because we think it's an awesome last mile piece because it's fully private and that's very helpful. Whereas obviously on-chain Bitcoin is not private. It is pseudonymous, which is awesome. It's not natively connected to your identity, which is very helpful. And you can even use on-chain Bitcoin in a way that's very privacy protecting. But when you move to something like Lightning or further ecash, you can be extremely private. So that's something we've been really focusing on because that's important for our, let's say, clientele and our community. But yeah, the wallets are just getting really easy, and the swaps are becoming really interesting. There's products like Bolts, which allow you to move from on-chain to Lightning to Liquid. Same thing with Aqua Wallet. These things are super helpful and useful around the world. A lot of people don't have access to the dollar financial system, but they're very into stable coins, and this allows them to have like a full suite of services where they can access dollars if they want them, and I get to use dollars. It's my native currency, so I'm born in it. But that's financial privilege. Most people are born into a currency that collapses 20, 30, 40, 50% every year or every 2 years. So this gives them optionality, which is really cool. So love seeing these new tools sprout up. Makes people really powerful. And again, the privacy stuff's just getting so good. Whereas 5-6 years ago it was tough. Now it's just not. I mean, especially with the Bolt 12 improvements. I also would say that Nostr is really interesting for zaps. Like it's an interesting way for creators in these economies to earn in a way that's fully sovereign and pretty private. And you can do things like payroll and collect donations with Nostr based stuff too. I mean, it can be as simple as like a fantasy football league thing, or it could be as complex as payroll for a large organization. But you can collect funds and distribute funds through Nostr identities as well, which is I think really, really cool. So those are some of the areas that we've been looking at.
Yeah, and I think it's important to bring those up because going back to the tax benefits of these funds, if you don't think the government can allocate money correctly, you can put your Bitcoin in a donor advised fund and give it to the charities that you think are building the critical infrastructure and the sort of the world you actually want to see built. And I guess on that note, turn it to you, Phoenix. What is the best way for an individual family office foundation to get off zero, to move assets into a DAF?
Yeah. So in terms of getting those set up, it's really easy to spin up a DAF. Actually, it's an account at the nonprofit that is sponsoring that donor advised fund. And so, yeah, in our case, our nonprofit is called University Impact. And so it's quick to spin one of those up. And from there, yeah, in terms of kind of the flow of figuring it out, it really starts with if it's you setting it up for yourself, it's, do you have a charitable interest, right? Is there if you don't have a charitable interest, a donor advised fund is actually not a great option. If you do have a charitable interest, then it becomes about doing things in the most tax efficient way possible. And so that's contributing assets that have a lot of capital gains liability. Once they're in the account, figuring out how it is you want them invested. And so a lot of the clients that have come to us from Unchained will say, I have a DAF at Fidelity. They're trying to put me into one of these 5, index fund portfolios. I don't think that's the best way that my philanthropic capital is going to grow. I want my account 100% in Bitcoin, and I want to hold a key to the DAF vault, so that I have that that additional visibility and security into that. And so that's what we cater to. Yeah.
No, this is a really interesting part of the market, because again, stressing like you can fund the things that you want to see in the world, instead of paying the taxes on your Bitcoin, the capital gains taxes, and allocate that money more efficiently in the government. Jason, what do you think is the most misunderstood aspect of DAFs, and particularly as they pertain to Bitcoin or something? Or maybe not misunderstood, but maybe what are people overlooking when it comes to this? Should this be on everybody's radar?
I think Bitcoiners or prospective Bitcoiners, so someone who is like considering getting into Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin, especially if you have other assets, many of them don't think about what is the end state. I think that infinite wealth accumulation is waste. There's a bunch of charities squandering money. You don't want to just start writing checks aimlessly, but there are incredible organizations creating significant impact in the world, like what Alex is working on with his team at HRF. And so just stop for a moment and think, what is the end state? Are we just going to hold up in our citadels after we've hodled? And like money is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. And so, if you have kids, generational wealth is an option, but thinking about, expanding your view a little bit and thinking about what is this wealth really for? Because many of us are pretty good at frugality, and many of us don't stop to think, what is the finish line? Like if I reach X amount of net worth, whether it be denominated in fiat or Bitcoin, what happens after that? And then in that case, DAF may be a useful tool for you, depending upon your interest in generosity.
Yeah, I like that,
Awesome.
Jason. I mean, we talk a lot about donor advised funds being a great vehicle for tax planning, but it's also just a great way to help you be really intentional in your giving. So sorry I cut you off a little bit, Marty, go ahead.
No, you're fine. If you want to expand on that, feel free.
No, I was just agreeing with Jason on it's tax planning, but it's also being very intentional and saying, this is what I'm setting aside. I'm going to work to figure out what organizations are accomplishing the change that I'd like to see in the world.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of that on HRF side, Alex? Donors with extreme intention?
Yeah, that's, I guess, what I'm saying. I mean, look, one thing was like remember there was that pineapple fund at the end of 2017 where someone's like, I made a bunch of money in Bitcoin, I'm going to give it away. And like they were just giving it away to random causes that had nothing to do necessarily with Bitcoin. And every single one of those causes liquidated the Bitcoin right away into dollars, right? So we're moving from a world where like people were early in Bitcoin. They were like, wow, I better give some away, without much thought to Bitcoin as a future currency of the world, or something that's going to be something you might want to hold on to for a while, into a world where donors who giving Bitcoin are much more conscious about it, especially after the crazy price gains of the last few years. Like, Pineapple Fund came out, I think Bitcoin was $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. Today it's whatever it is, $112,000. I mean, it's people have sobered up in terms of realizing where this is going. So I think in general, a lot of people don't part with their Bitcoin lightly. They would much rather part with their fiat instruments. So when someone is going to part with fiat with their Bitcoin, I think it tells you something. And again, if you're listening and if you're going to receive a grant, always great to get the donor to just like put their donor intent in writing, because then it secures you against, whatever, some accountant that wants you to sell it, right? So the donor intent's very powerful as well.
Yeah. And we have 10 minutes left in the panel. We do have a question, so I want to make sure we get to that. If you do have a question and you're in the audience, feel free to put them in the chat and we will read them. But we only have one right now, and it is: endowment bylaws often require they spend around 4% of the gains per year, which requires yield. How can a Bitcoin endowment best be done if the Bitcoin has no yield? In parentheses, Bitcoin derivatives notwithstanding, spend down the endowment principal, taxable events for charities. How does the fact that Bitcoin doesn't have any native yield impact how a Bitcoin endowment operates at the end of the day?
Yeah, that's a great question, and maybe I'll like to hear what you guys have to say as well. Yeah, big difference between DAFs and private foundations is private foundations do have a required annual 5% payout. And so a lot of private foundations function on kind of that endowment model where you're putting assets into it, and then 5% a year is going to be to be paid out to accomplish that private foundation's mission. Donor advised funds actually don't have any required annual payout. And so if you fund in 1 year and you say, there's this big project I'm planning, 2 years down the line, and that's when we're going to accomplish our giving, you can do that. Our payout rates, we see around, last time we ran the numbers, I believe it was 18% a year, which means, of what someone's balance in their donor advised fund, they're paying out about 18% of that. But to answer your question, as far as how are they thinking about that? For our donors, we've seen they'll just they'll liquidate the portion of their Bitcoin that they'd like to give in that year. So they'll either convert it to cash to give to charities, or if charities can accept it in Bitcoin, they'll transfer that portion to them. But that's sort of been their what we've seen so far is just they have some amount that they'd like to give annually out of that endowment, and there isn't any yield, so they'll give away that portion of the Bitcoin in their account. And so far we haven't seen any super creative ways in terms of in terms of thinking about how do you pay out that endowment portion within your DAF. So but yeah, Jason and Alex, any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I
Jason,
think,
go ahead.
yeah, I think for me, in some case, like, you have to be really careful with charities. There's a lot of fiat squandering of money, and so for me, I'm doing most of my giving later in life. Was just trying to move assets into Bitcoin and begin to hodl with the final destination. So, I have a charity that I'm looking at right now. They're raising 1 Bitcoin and going to keep it in Bitcoin, I believe, for 4 years. And so probably going to donate to those guys and support what they're doing. They're doing really great work, and there's probably some more due diligence that I will do before I make that donation, but that's going to come straight out of my DAF. But if it's 18%, they're liquidating or giving out, in many cases that means that their Bitcoin's only going to grow even with that expenditure rate each year, depending upon the year. I mean, over time, we know that Bitcoin's appreciating faster than that generally. So you could sort of DCA out basically on an annual basis, or however you wanted to do it.
Awesome. Well, we got 5 minutes left, and I just want to give the three of you the floor for any final thoughts or really any calls to action that you think anybody listening on the live stream or later when the recorded panel is posted should be thinking about as it pertains to the philanthropic consideration on the edge, the intersection of Bitcoin and DAFs.
Yeah, I would say don't leave it up to the state to do your giving for you. It's your responsibility as a citizen to improve the world. It's not the government's job. The government has its place, but Bitcoiners are held to a higher standard, I think, because they have their cost of living is going down every year. Their purchasing power is going up every year. Let's do something with it. Be thoughtful about it.
Yeah, for an action item, we've actually got a course for nonprofits and for people making grants where they can learn about how to use Bitcoin, how to integrate it into what they're doing. And collaborative custody services are certainly, part of that at the end. I mean, you're starting from zero usually with folks, though. I mean, it's so we're just trying to get them using Bitcoin self-custodially, just understanding the power of it. But obviously, once an organization integrates at an institutional level, they need open source payment processing, donation receiving. They need to understand privacy. They need to understand UTXO management. They need to understand a whole bunch of different things. But we get started from 0 to 1, and that's a course. So if anyone's listening or watching and wants to learn more, you can sign up for our next one. It's every quarter. The next one's going to be in December. It's led by BTC Sessions, who's probably the best technical educator, in my opinion, in the world about Bitcoin, as well as Anna Chekovich, who's been running the finances for the Anti-Corruption Foundation in Russia that Alexei Navalny founded. They've been using Bitcoin in operations in adversarial conditions for almost a decade. So it's two people who are super knowledgeable about this. And both have seen the power of Bitcoin as a protest tool, both in Canada and in Russia. And if you go to href.org/unstoppable, you can see what we've got, and you can sign up. And you can also request like offline workshops as well. So yes, that's href.org/unstoppable. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks. I didn't know about that course, Alex. That's cool to hear about. I would just echo what Jason said. I think as we get to the end of the year and people are looking at their their income for the year, if you'd like to reduce that and reduce the taxable income that you have for the year, and allocate some of those dollars or some of that Bitcoin on your of your own accord, charitably, then a donor advised fund might be a good option for you.
Awesome. Well, we're brushing up right on time. I would like to echo what all of you said. I think making sure that you're intentional and you're thinking long term, and Jason, specifically what you said, Bitcoiners being held to a higher standard. We've certainly benefited from the increasing purchasing power of Bitcoin, and I think the fact that we're early adopters of this gives us some foresight, and not only foresight, but the ability to intuitively know that you can actually just do things and build a better world by supporting alternative networks that enable people to opt out from despotic governments or governments that have simply gone drunk with power. And these donor advised funds provide you a way to not have to give tax dollars to the government and actually allocate money how you see fit, and give the causes that you think are actually making the world a better place the money they need to go and achieve their goals. And so I just want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us, talking about all of this and the work that you're doing individually and as a collective. This is an all hands on deck type of situation. So I also want to thank everybody who joined us for the live stream and the one brave individual who asked a question. And I guess with that, I guess that's all we got. This was a great 45 minutes, kept it tight. And so thank you guys, and hopefully this was helpful for you all.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for tuning in.